If you have a home that you've been thinking of renting out or potentially part of your home, you're probably asking your question, does my homeowner's policy cover my property if I'm turning part of my house into a rental? So there is a thing out there called a landlord's insurance policy, and this is probably what you need if you're renting out your house. Now, there are a few instances if you're renting out, for example, a short-term rental, someone's going to rent a room in your house for a couple weeks, your homeowner's policy would probably cover you for that. But any sort of 6-month rentals or more, or Airbnb and frequent short-term rentals, you're going to need to look into a landlord's policy because your homeowner's insurance is just not going to cut it. My name's Brian Johnson. I've been a real estate broker my whole life. I am in the property management and on the brokerage side of real estate, so I deal with this issue quite a bit. I wanted to talk a little bit about this because I've had some people asking me, does my homeowner's insurance cover me on turning my home into a rental property? The answer is, if you're going to turn your home into a rental property, absolutely not do you want to use your homeowner's insurance policy. It's not going to cover you. Now, if you own your property free and clear, it is not required in any state. There is no law that requires you to have landlord insurance. But if you have a mortgage on the property or you're going to buy a property, that mortgage company is certainly going to require you to have insurance. Now, insurance has gotten very expensive recently. There's a lot of reasons for that, but inflation, the natural disasters, wildfires, the cost of construction, the price of new homes and new construction, those are all factors that are driving insurance rates through the roof. Speaking of roofs, you can have a roof that just a few years ago might have cost $12,000 or $14,000 to replace, can easily come in at $25,000 or $30,000 now. Insurance companies are absolutely looking at things like roofs and systems and all that, the age of roofs and systems, to determine whether or not to give you policy, approval. What are the reasons that you want to have a landlord's policy? And basically, what do they include? Now, a landlord's policy is going to include coverage for the structure, the damage to the structure if the property is damaged, obviously, never the land. You don't insure the land, it's just going to be the dwelling. Also, a landlord's policy is probably going to, and make sure it covers this, other structures on the property. So outbuildings, separate garages and fences, those sort of things should be covered by the landlord's insurance. So should equipment on the property that's used to maintain the property. So think of if you have an expensive snowblower or landscaping equipment like expensive mowers, that stuff should be also included in your landlord's policy. Also should be included, or you should have in your landlord's policy, and the reason that you really want this is liability protection from lawsuits from tenants. This is huge. You need a big policy for this. Honestly, I would recommend at least $500,000 or probably $1 million. And if you own more than one property, I'd be looking at umbrella protection, because if there's some problem on your property, a tenant hurts themselves and you're found liable, it could become very, very expensive. You want your landlord's policy to be covering that. Now, there's another thing that landlord policies can cover, and this is really important, and this is loss of rents due to any sort of damage to the property. So let's say there's a massive fire. Obviously, your tenants have moved out and you have loss of rents for 6 months while you're rebuilding or fixing the structure. This will help cover those rents for you to keep you basically in business and receiving rental income that's through no fault of your own. Now, a common misconception is that landlord's insurance policies cover renters and renters' personal property. It does not. Renters insurance is what covers renters' personal property and also tenant liability to the landlord for damage. If the tenant damages something, then they're liable. That renters insurance policy should cover that. In our company, we require every tenant to carry renters insurance. In fact, our policy that if they don't bring their own renters insurance, our policy for renters insurance doesn't actually cover their belongings. It covers their potential damage to the property. We had a situation a few years ago. This is horrible. And some people, if you look this up online, will say, renters insurance is not for covering the damage to the property. It was a sixplex. One of the units, the tenant left some water on and left it running over a few weeks. Massive damage to the property. It was a rebuild of all 6 units all the way down to the studs. The water damage was massive and extensive. The tenant was liable for the damage. The landlord's policy did not cover this. And the reason was obviously because it wasn't a natural disaster. It wasn't a flood. It wasn't any sort of water damage like that. It was liability to the tenant's liability for causing the damage. This was very expensive for that landlord. So you want to, as a landlord, require your tenants to have renter's insurance with liability protection. Also, that renter's insurance is going to cover if their friend gets hurt on the property, they're drinking and they get hurt. That also will help protect the landlord in that case from being sued by the tenant or the tenant's friends for any sort of personal damage to their bodies that they have to have covered. You want that renter's insurance policy for every single tenant, and you need to include it in your lease that it's required that renters have renter's insurance. Now, landlord insurance is going to cost you more than just a homeowner's insurance policy. I've seen it cost up to 25% more than just homeowner's insurance policy, but again, it's covering additional items like liability to tenants and hopefully loss of income due to loss of rent. So it's going to cost you a little bit more. Also, of course, all insurance that you pay for is tax deductible on your tax returns to count against that rental income. So you have to worry about that. And that also, that helps offset the cost a little bit by having that as a tax deduction at the end of the year. Another thing I've got to say here is that you don't just want dwelling coverage, you want guaranteed replacement costs. If you have total damage, if you don't have guaranteed replacement costs, you're not going to get enough money to completely put that structure back into use that you can put tenants into. They may cover systems and walls and wiring and plumbing, but that's not the same as guaranteed replacement cost, where your entire structure is going to be covered and it's rebuilt like it was before, well, better than it was before because it would be brand new. But you want to make sure you have guaranteed replacement costs. And there are some things that landlord's insurance is not going to cover. There's some funny things out there: volcanic activity, mudslides, erosions, earth movement such as earthquakes might not be covered by landlord insurance. Water damage by sewer and drain backups. This is huge. You might want to get an external insurance policy. There are companies out there that will cover that. I know that when I have a purchaser buying a property, like sometimes I'll give them an insurance policy, that will cover like their furnace, the stuff like that. A new buyer of a home will have insurance that will be covering that stuff. So you might want to look at drain backups and sewer plans externally from other insurance just besides your landlord's insurance. Negligence and asbestos removal are not going to be covered by your landlord's insurance policy. Additional coverage that I would consider would be burglary, vandalism, building codes, floods, things like that. You can get additional coverages for those things. Some other coverage things you can get would be debris removal, fire department, service change, trees, shrubs, plants, and collapse of property. I'm not an insurance total expert on this stuff, but this is additional things that you want to have covered. Like we talked about, the cost could be up to 25% more. Some of the things that also is going to affect insurance, just like on homeowners: are you close to a fire hydrant? Are you close to a fire department? Are you in an area that has a lot of trees that can cause fire damage and roof damage? Are you in a zone that has a lot of property damage from storms and things like that? If you're in California or Florida, you could be totally screwed because so many insurance companies are bailing from there. A lot of reasons: regulatory hurdles. Florida has had a huge amount of insurance fraud over the last few years from shoddy roofing contractors. That's been a massive, massive problem. So some states, it's just really, really tough to get insurance. But even in those states, you still want to look at it. You want to find a way to get coverage, and you really want to find a way to protect yourself. And like always, you want to look at your deductible and what you can afford to pay. If there is damage, a higher deductible is going to give you lower premiums. Obviously, a lower deductible might sound really good, but it's going to give you a lot higher premiums. Now, we've also seen in our business on the property management side, we have seen on not commercial, but residential units that say you have an 8-unit apartment building, we're having landlords have trouble getting reinsured on these properties. Insurance companies now are wanting to see everything inspected. They're asking to see an inspection on the roof. They're asking to see an inspection on the electrical wiring. They're looking to have inspections done on the heating systems, the air conditioning systems, and then they're reviewing these inspections to determine either the policy amount and the payments, or whether or not they're even going to insure these properties. So if you're a landlord, you want to get your systems up to date. You want to be maintaining your properties at all times as a landlord. So one of the things is a good property manager needs to be making sure that you are maintaining that property to a really high standard. It's cheaper to run over time. You get a better quality tenant. You make more money because you can charge more rent. But the other thing is by maintaining systems like electrical systems, wiring, plumbing, heating, air conditioning, when it comes to reinsurance time, you're going to get better premiums, or hopefully you'll still get coverage, because you don't want to get no coverage at all. But you want to still be able to get coverage by maintaining your systems and getting a good premium. And as you've probably heard in the news, insurance costs are absolutely on the rise. 35 out of 50 states, insurance costs have gone up 15% per year over the last 3 years. That's a really big number. That really adds up. So watch your deductible, maintain your property, but maintain insurance coverage because you really want to keep yourself protected in today's world. It's the best way as a landlord to to basically maximize your profits in case of a catastrophic loss. Even a minor loss can really dig into your profits over a short period of time. A catastrophic loss means you're out of business. So maintain your insurance and get good coverage.